Everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're embarking on basically the ultimate quest, how to learn absolutely anything faster, retain it longer, and, most importantly, stop wasting your precious time on study habits that, frankly, just don't work. We're going to break down the actual science of memory. We'll be looking at insights from medical doctors, language learners, and even professional artists, all to completely reshape how you absorb information. So get ready, because we're about to upgrade your brain.
Right, so have you ever pulled an all-nighter, crammed for an exam, miraculously passed, and then 48 hours later, your mind is just a complete blank? Yep, we've all been there. It's incredibly frustrating for sure, but it's also deeply human. This whole universal pain point is actually caused by something called the forgetting curve. This was first identified way back in 1885 by a German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus. And what he discovered is that without active intervention, human memory decays exponentially over time. It literally just drops off a cliff.
To put this into a pretty terrifying perspective, let's look at medical students. According to data from the medical education platform Osmosis, without intervention, medical students lose over 50% of their basic science knowledge within just 2 years. I mean, can you imagine your future doctor just forgetting half of what they learned about human anatomy? It's wild. It proves that traditional studying, just reading and rereading, is essentially like radioactive decay. The knowledge just vanishes into thin air.
Okay, let's dive into this. The ultimate antidote to all this mental decay is spaced repetition. Honestly, think of it as the celebrated magic pill of the learning world. So instead of cramming, you review information at increasingly spaced out intervals. We're talking 1 day, then maybe 3 days, then a week, then a month. By deliberately challenging your brain to retrieve the information right on the very verge of forgetting it, you interrupt that forgetting curve. And every single time you successfully recall it, you flatten that curve out a little bit more, firmly locking it into your long-term memory. Part 1. Building your spacing system. So one of the oldest and most reliable physical methods out there is the Leitner system, which is heavily detailed by medical doctor and productivity expert Mike. Here's how it works in practice. You create 5 physical shoe boxes and grab a stack of index cards. Box 1 gets studied every single day, box 2 is every other day, box 3 is once a week, and so on. Every time you get a flashcard right, boom, you promote it to the next box, which means you'll review it less often. But, and here's the kicker, if you get it wrong, it goes all the way back to box 1. This brilliantly ensures you're spending your time focusing only on your weakest subjects.
Now, if you're more into a digital approach, Cambridge medical grad Ali Abdaal uses what we can call the spreadsheet scattergun system. Instead of a super rigid revision timetable where you're planning out exactly what you'll study weeks in advance, you just create a master Google sheet of all your topics. After you actively test yourself on a topic, you date it and then color code it based on how hard it felt. Red for hard, yellow for medium, green for easy. Then every day you just open up the spreadsheet and attack the reds. It heavily encourages interleaving, which is basically rapidly switching between completely different subjects like chemistry, biology, and math. And surprisingly, that actually forces your brain to work harder and learn much faster.
And the power of spacing is absolutely incredible, even in the extreme short term. Check this out. A fascinating 2011 study on students learning Swahili vocabulary found something amazing. If you take your flashcards, review them, and instead of just grinding through them all in one massive block, you simply space out the repeated recall of the same words within that single study session, exam performance jumped by a staggering 50%. The students who spaced their repetitions in the exact same session scored up to 80%. They were doing the exact same amount of work, literally just in a slightly different order. No way, right?
Part 2. The skill application.
Okay, so to really master this, we have to differentiate between 2 completely different types of knowing, a concept explored a lot by the learning channel 10,000 Hours. First, you've got declarative knowledge. This is purely theoretical, like memorizing the names of all 63 kings and queens of England or rote learning 600 Spanish words. But then you have procedural knowledge, which is practical. It's the actual doing. Because let's be real, memorizing 600 Spanish words is not going to automatically help you survive a fast-paced, slang-filled conversation in a bustling cafe in Madrid, right? Drawing, playing the piano, speaking a language fluently, those are all procedural.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we can actually use spaced repetition for procedural skills, like art. You don't just read a book about painting. No, you isolate a single specific concept, let's say painting with gouache glazes. Then you create an active recall challenge for yourself, like, painting a dog using only 10 values. You plug that physical challenge into a spaced repetition app like Anki. And when the algorithm tells you to review that card a week later, you don't just read about it again. You physically get out your paints and do the drill. It's all about compounding tiny daily physical efforts over time. It's literally like filling a bucket drip by drip.
And if you do this enough, you develop what we can call the Ronaldo reflex. Think about it. If someone passes a football to your average person while two massive defenders are charging right at them, it's going to take like 90% of their brain power just to keep the ball at their feet. But Cristiano Ronaldo, he has spaced and drilled ball control so intensely for so long that it only takes up maybe 3% of his cognitive awareness. Because it's an embedded, deep physical reflex, the rest of his brain is completely free to scan the field, outsmart those defenders, and make a genius creative play. And that right there is the ultimate goal of procedural spaced repetition.
Part 3. The Spaced Repetition Trap.
All right, well, we have to hit the brakes for a second and look at a total paradigm shift from learning coach Dr. Justin Sung. He points out something incredibly profound, which is this: studying is not the same thing as learning. He actually humorously notes that, hey, you could repeatedly smash your face into a textbook. Technically, sure, that's a study technique, but it produces absolutely zero actual learning inside your brain. Learning is a very distinct cognitive process of actually encoding information.
And this brilliantly illustrates the journey of information. First up, information hits your sensory memory, which basically discards almost everything right away just to save energy. If you actually pay attention, it moves into your working memory. Now think of the working memory as a hotel lobby. Information can hang out there for a few minutes, maybe use the Wi-Fi, but if it doesn't have a booked room, it gets picked right back out onto the street. To secure that permanent room, the information must be deeply encoded into your long-term memory.
So here is the big trap. Spaced repetition is fundamentally a retrieval tool. Its whole job is to pull information out, but you can't retrieve what you haven't properly encoded in the first place, right? If you just use flashcards to rote memorize surface-level facts without deeply understanding them, you are fighting a leaky bucket. You're just going to exhaust yourself, essentially forcing your brain to relearn the exact same forgotten material over and over again, yielding rapidly diminishing returns. It's a total grind.
Part 4. The Deep Encoding Solution.
So, how do we fix this? With deep encoding. This is the process of initially learning information with a really high cognitive load to ensure it firmly sticks in your long-term memory. Basically, if you put in the intense, heavy mental lifting to encode the information at 100% quality the very first time you encounter it, you dramatically flatten that forgetting curve from day one. You won't need to review it nearly as often, which is ultimately going to save you hundreds of hours of revision down the line.
This brings us to the actual feeling of learning, which is all about something called desirable difficulty. If you're studying and you feel bored, drowsy, or passive, like when you're just mindlessly dragging a highlighter across a textbook, your cognitive load is way too low. True learning is actually supposed to feel uncomfortable. If you feel slightly confused, if you're actively questioning how different concepts connect together, your cognitive load is high. That discomfort, that is the literal physical sensation of deep encoding happening inside your brain. It's exactly like going to the gym. If your muscles aren't burning, you aren't growing.
So I want you to take a hard look at your own habits. When you sit down at your desk, are you actually engaging in the desirable difficulty of true encoding, or are you just passively repeating things? Are you utilizing the incredible power of spaced repetition to build true physical and mental reflexes, or are you just desperately fighting a leaky bucket? Stop passively repeating your studies. Embrace the cognitive burn of deep encoding and just watch how fast you can truly learn anything.